The prince found a mysterious woman frozen in the lake, and the crest hidden in her hand. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The morning at Windsor held its breath. Frost drew its thin veil over the lawns. The trees wore glassy sleeves. The lake lay still as polished stone. Prince Edward walked to hear the quiet and let it steady him. Snow gave a soft crunch beneath his boots. His breath smoked the air like a prayer he did not say aloud. He did not seek company nor spectacle. He sought a stretch of time without counsel or pledge. He counted each pace to the far bend of the path. He knew the shape of every willow and the way morning light spread pale across the ice. That was why the dark shadow beneath the surface startled him. It did not belong. Not here. Not now. He stopped. The shape lay 10 paces from the bank, near the reeds, where wind never reached. It was the suggestion of a form, a curve, a fall of fabric caught and held. He looked once, twice, then he turned and called down the path, his voice even but urgent. "Ho there! You! Send for the pages, bring a plank, and blankets." A gardener heard him and bowed in alarm. 2 boys broke into a run, breath chuffing, faces bright with effort. Within minutes, a bench from the fishing hut was in the prince's hands. He laid it flat on the ice and tested the surface. He did not strike the lake. He coaxed. He pressed. He listened for complaint in the ice and gave it none. He slid out on his belly over the bench's length. Cold touched his ribs. He reached. The water held its secret a moment longer, as if undecided. He did not speak to the shadow. He spoke to the morning, the lake himself. "Hush, be easy." The pages on the bank lay flat as well and held the bench's far side. A stable hand steadied the prince by the heel. Slow by slow, he drew the shape nearer. Linen brushed against the edge of the plank. Fingers, pale and slack, appeared from a fold of dark cloth. He closed his own fingers around them. They were cold as stone. They were a person's. He felt it like a shock through bone. "Now," he said gently. "Now." They drew her toward the bank, not dragging, not tearing. They let the water surrender her. They laid her on the winter grass. A boy stripped off his coat without being told. Another spread his own on top. The prince took the weight of her shoulders. He said only, "Breathe," though she did not seem able. Her lashes carried tiny beads of frost. The little crystals shook loose when he brushed them with the back of his hand. Her lips were the color of dusk. She made no sound. But she was not empty. He knew, without knowing how, that she had merely gone far inside herself to find warmth. He spoke again. "Breathe." They carried her to the small warming chamber beside the kitchens, the one kept for those who came in from winter rides too far, too long. The hearth answered at once. A cook swore she had never seen such a sight, and then clapped both hands over her mouth, ashamed of the oath. A fire was fed and fed again. Steam rose from warmed bricks set near her feet. A maid began to rub her arms through the cloth using brisk strokes. The prince sat on a low stool. He did not mind the damp soaking his sleeves. He set his own cloak aside and asked the boys to fetch a second. He did not permit fuss. He permitted care. Brother Thomas came at the messenger's whisper. His steps were unhurried. He carried a small case and a basin of warm water. He set the case down and knelt. "We will not frighten her," he said. "We will call her back." They worked without noise. The cook's helper brought cups of hot water with a pinch of honey. A laundress filled a cloth, wrung it tight and handed it to the prince. He pressed it to the woman's neck with a steady hand. Brother Thomas leaned close and listened at her mouth for the foggy thread of breath. It came, faint at first, then steadier. Her chest moved, her fingers twitched. The prince released a breath he had not noticed he held. "Good," Brother Thomas murmured. "Good." The woman's hair clung to her temples. It was dark where it was wet and lighter where it dried. Her face, stripped of any ornament, was plainly formed. The kind of face that would change with a smile or a sorrow. Her lashes fluttered. Her eyes opened slowly, as if they had to remember how. They were soft brown, wide and confused. She looked up at the high beams of the ceiling, as if they had names she used to know. The prince did not speak first. Brother Thomas did. "You are safe," he said. "You are warm." Her mouth tried the word warm and could not find it. She tried again. Warm." She blinked. She found the prince's face at last and studied it as if it were a sigil she was meant to learn. "You were in the lake," the prince said. He kept his voice low. "We brought you out. You are among friends." She parted her lips to answer and stopped. Her eyes moved behind their surface as though searching a shelf. She whispered the smallest sound. Brother Thomas lifted her left hand to rub warmth into it. The movement loosed the cloth that had stuck to her palm. The prince saw a faint shape there. Not dirt, not a bruise. A mark, curved and deliberate, as though made by a careful hand with a hot seal. The lines were old, not angry, yet they had a presence. The prince leaned closer, the better to see. Brother Thomas drew in a breath. He did not cry out. He bowed his head, then lifted it with calm authority. "That is no common mark." "What is it?" the cook whispered from the doorway, then made as if to leave when Brother Thomas turned to her. "Close the door," he said gently, "and tell the page at the threshold to admit no one without purpose." The kitchen woman obeyed. The room gathered in a little. The woman whose hand they studied watched them as one watches birds lift from a field. She might have said it did not concern her, yet the skin bearing the mark was her own. Brother Thomas traced the crest with the back of a finger, not quite touching. A crown with a split branch, 2 leaves, one pointed inward. "There is a star above, small, I have seen it in a book." The prince remembered a child's tale. He had been told in a kinder voice that not all stories held for grown men. Still, memory placed that little star. "Aveline." Brother Thomas inclined his head. "Yes." The woman on the edge of listening blinked. The name moved through her like a soft wind. Aveline. It was not a word she could fit into her mouth and claim, yet it tugged from behind the wall of things she could not see. Her fingers curled almost imperceptibly, as if trying to hold on to something that slipped like water. "What does it mean?" the prince asked, not to press, to confirm what he already guessed. "The House of Aveline," said Brother Thomas, "kept a book for the crown, not a prayer book, a ledger. It named promises made and kept, it named sums given and received. It was an oath. The keeper bore the crest, not on a ring, not on a banner, on the skin." The prince looked at the woman's palm. It seemed a gentle place to put such a weight. He looked back at her face and saw the tremor in her lips. "Can you tell us your name?" he asked. She tried again. She reached toward her own name, as toward a strand of thread in low light. Her mind gave her the shape of letters without their sound. She closed her eyes. The effort made a small furrow in her brow. "It will come," Brother Thomas said, not to soothe as to state. "Give it no fear." She opened her eyes to the prince. He did not look away. She saw in his gaze no triumph in having brought her back, only a steady patience as if he would stand by a door until the person inside could cross it. The door opened again, because information in a palace never sits quietly in one room. A steward's wife carrying a tray appeared and halted at the sight of the prince, then bobbed a curtsy so deep she nearly spilled the broth. Behind her, a narrow ribbon of corridor showed a drift of shadow. Voices did not enter, but one felt them gathering. The steward's wife set the tray down. "For her," she said, "with honey." "Thank you," the prince said. "Leave it." She obeyed, but her eyes slid to the woman's hand with a curiosity she could not hide. She crossed herself as if the room were a chapel. Then she slipped out. The voices in the corridor came no closer. They went the other way, and not by accident. Within an hour, the warming chamber held more attention than any room its size deserved. The prince knew it as one knows weather by the air's taste. He sighed, almost smiling without joy. "It is a palace," he said to the woman. "My apologies." She did not understand and did. She glanced at the door as if it was a future. The king's counsellor, Lord Wycliffe, arrived with the dignity of a man who never permits haste to compromise his dignity. He stood at the threshold, then entered with measured steps. He carried no raised voice. He brought order the way winter brings order, by pressing everything down. "Your Highness," he said to the prince, "I was told you asked for quiet. I see quiet is now rather full." "We have a guest who requires warmth," the prince said. Wycliffe's eyes moved to the woman, to Brother Thomas, to the basin, to the marked hand. His gaze returned to the prince. "Of course, the right course. And in due time, the right questions." "Questions can wait until she can sit upright," Brother Thomas said. Wycliffe inclined his head in the cleric's direction with professional respect. "Certainly. But arrangements must be made. For the lady, for the Queen's peace, for the court's temper. He chose his words to be gentle and let them mean other things. The arrangements are these, the prince said. She is lodged near. She is attended. She is not made a spectacle. Wycliffe's lips moved as if he tasted a sweet stronger than he expected. And yet the mark, Brother Thomas, the mark, Brother Thomas answered, belongs to an old vow tied to the crown's own memory. It is not the devil's trick. It is not a fashion. It is not to be hidden out of fear, nor paraded, Wycliffe said, as if he offered a kindness. Nor paraded, Brother Thomas agreed. Lady Cecily Grey came in with a shawl on her arm and the air of one entering in service. She did not look surprised to see the prince. She was never surprised in public. She set the shawl at the foot of the couch and met the woman's eyes with a soft smile that could have been kindness, could have been policy. "For the chill," she said. "Thank you," the prince replied. Lady Cecily's gaze flicked to the marked hand and held there one breath too long. "How singular," she said, almost under her breath, then brightened her tone. "I will arrange for gloves. Every hand is better for them in January." The woman tried to make her lips answer with thanks. She managed a nod. Her body was returning by inches. Her mind came slower. The name she could not find sat just beyond her grasp, stubborn and necessary. Wycliffe addressed the room. "We shall have a hearing in the solar afternoon, not a spectacle, a small inquiry. Only those whose duty is clear." The prince did not disagree in words. He did not agree either. He wrapped the shawl Lady Cecily had brought around the woman's shoulders. He lifted the cup and held it to her mouth. "Sip," he said. She obeyed. The sweetness of honey took her by surprise. It made the next breath easier. It allowed her to find the question inside her mouth. "Where am I?" "In the warming room," the prince answered with a small smile. "Inside the castle at Windsor." She turned the name Windsor over slowly. It had weight. It did not hurt. It sat as a stone sits in a river, letting water pass around it. "And you?" "I am Edward," he said. He did not add more. He did not perform the title as a badge. He set his name like a hand on a table. If she reached for it, it would be there. Her brow drew in a little. The name touched another door inside her and knocked softly. It went unanswered, but not unwelcome. Wycliffe made a small motion, as though he would have liked to take the cup and the care and pass them to a maid. He stopped himself. He had a sense for the constraint of moments. He murmured something about preparing the solar and left, carrying the room's balance of air with him. Lady Cecily remained a moment longer. She adjusted the shawl, which did not need adjusting. "I am glad you live," she said. She said it as one says words that will be quoted later. Then she went out as quietly as she had come. The woman let the silence settle around the hearth. She listened to the fire, to the soft, practical sounds of others at work for her sake, the rub of cloth on cloth, the faint clink of the basin. She watched the prince's hands. They were hands used to reins and letters, not rough, not ornamented, not idle. They rested very near her own. Brother Thomas, seeing some colour return to her cheeks, leaned back on his heels. "Tell me a single thing you know," he said in a gentle test. "Anything at all, not a name, a word." She searched the small room in her mind and found a simple bench. She took it, half expecting it to become smoke when she tried to sit on it. "Water," she said. The sound made something inside her unclench. "Yes," Brother Thomas said. "Good." The prince regarded her with an expression she did not know how to name. It was respect, but warmer. Relief, shaped into patience. "You are safe," he said again, as if laying the sentence like another shawl over her. Later, as the winter light shifted against the small high window, the chamber saw a slow parade of courtesies. A clean linen was brought, a second cup of sweetness, a pair of woolen stockings that no one thought to ask whether she had the strength to pull on. She tried to sit and managed it. Hands helped her and then left her to rest. Rumour, of course, ran faster than courtesy. By the time the bell for noon chimed, the corridors knew there was a woman from the lake and that she bore a mark. There were opinions. They said nothing different to her face than gentleness. But even gentleness can be a cage if the bars are made of presumption. The hearing after noon brought the first true weight. The solar was warm and bright, Windows threw pale winter across a carpet. Chairs were placed with mathematical care. The king did not attend. This was a matter for those below his time. The Queen sent a maid to listen. Brother Thomas sat with his chronicle and his pen. Wycliffe took a place with paper of his own. Lady Cecily stood near the hearth, so as not to be seen as one of the inquirers, and not to be mistaken for a bystander. The woman sat and held her cup. Her hand remembered heat and the taste of honey. The prince stood at her shoulder. Wycliffe opened the matter with a bow, a few plain sentences, and a promise to keep to essentials. He asked her where she had come from. She tried to answer and lost the thread. "Water," she said, and flushed. He asked whether she knew anyone present before today. She looked at the faces and found them all new. "No," she said. He asked whether she had ever seen the crest in her palm before. She looked at her hand. The mark looked old. It looked like something that had known skin and moved with it. "I do not know," she said. Brother Thomas asked only one question. "Do you feel fear?" She surprised herself. "No," she said, and meant it. "Only the sense of a door I must open and cannot yet see," Lady Cecily murmured at the hearth. "A poet," she said softly. It was not unkind. Wycliffe proposed that for comfort and the comfort of the court, the lady might be lodged in a quiet place, where any trouble could not find her. The words sounded like care. They sounded also like distance. The prince said, "Here is a quiet place. Her trouble has already found her. We do not improve it by setting it down before others we do not trust." Wycliffe did not wince. He nodded. "There is also the matter of the mark. We must be sure it is what Brother Thomas names." Brother Thomas lifted his pen. "We cannot be more sure without seeing the book that bears its like. And yet I confess, I have never seen its like on living skin." Lady Cecily stepped forward with gloves. "In the meantime, this is modest and wise." The woman looked at the gloves. She thought how easily silk could dress a thing and make it vanish without ever moving it. She did not take them. She folded her hands together and let the shawl hide them. In the end, nothing was decided, which was in such rooms often the decision. The woman was to have a tower room near the infirmary. A maid would attend. Brother Thomas would record her hours and any memory that returned. The prince would be informed of changes. Wycliffe would ensure that news did not find a mouth larger than prudence. They rose. The prince offered his arm. She took it. A page opened the door. They passed between two bowing servants into the thin cool of the corridor. The castle recognized her now. Its air felt altered, as if a new spice had been placed in an old cupboard. She held herself still to keep from shaking. The room assigned to her was small and clean. The bed was turned down, the fire was already laid. A basket held a comb and a new bar of soap. The maid, a pale girl with kind hands, asked if she might unbraid the knots in the woman's hair. The woman assented because it seemed to please the maid. The prince hovered and did not. He gave the maid instructions and then checked himself, smiling at his own interference. He moved toward the door and halted. He looked back at the woman. He seemed to choose between two sentences and took the truer. "I will come," he said, "not as a judge, as myself." She did not understand what that meant for a man like him. She understood enough to feel less alone. "Thank you," she said. He bowed and left. Brother Thomas sat at a small table near the window and wrote quietly, on his own, the date and the hour and the names of those who had been present. He wrote a line about the absence of fear in the woman's eyes. He closed the book and rose. "Rest," he said. "Eat. Do not chase memory. It will come when it pleases." She lay down because her body insisted. The shawl held a faint scent of lavender, the kind used to keep moths from linens. It smelled like a life. She closed her eyes and saw the black underside of ice like a ceiling above her. She opened them and saw a beam. She closed them again. She drifted and jerked and drifted, like a boat hitting small waves. At last she slept. She did not sleep long. In sleep she stood in a place that knew her better than she knew herself. Stone, a wall not far from her face, a carved angel with an open palm, its eyes laid upon a seam in the stone, not at her. She reached for the seam with her left hand and felt a seat for the meat of her palm. It fit. She pressed. A click answered. She woke with her heart beating fast, as if she had run. The maid looked up from the hearth. "Forgive me," she said. "It's near evening." The light had fallen into a softer color. The cold in the room was no longer a bite. It was an influence. The woman sat very still. She looked down at her hem. A smear of pale dust lay there, the kind one might gather leaning against a chapel wall. Her fingers, when she touched them together, had the faint grit of stone on them. She rose slowly, more to see if she could than because she wished to go anywhere. The maid helped her pull the woolen stockings over her feet. The woman felt her toes tingle as if they were rejoicing. A knock at the door announced the prince before it admitted him. He entered with a parcel under his arm and a smile that had learned restraint at court, and now tested whether it might be allowed to be freer. He set the parcel on the stool by the fire. "Gloves," he said, and paused. "And bread. If the kitchen sent too little. They do that when they have too much to think about and do not know what to think first." She smiled for the first time. It was a small, cautious thing, but it came easily once she let it. "Thank you." He took the smile as one takes a gift and does not make a show of it. He moved toward the small table, then toward her, then checked himself again, as if he were still learning how to be in a room that was not entirely his to command. Brother Thomas, returning from a brief errand, entered after him and closed the door. "There is one more thing," Brother Thomas said. "I have been to the chapel. I looked in the old record. The crest is as we thought, Aveline, and the clause is as I remembered. The bearer of the crest is bound to the ledger, the crown is bound to the bearer, while the mark shall remain upon the skin." The woman did not know the ledger. She knew the word bound. It tugged at something deep and quick. The prince frowned in thought. "Bound to the bearer," he repeated. "That is language with teeth if one wishes to bite, or a hand's grasp if one wishes to hold." Brother Thomas nodded. "It is binding, not biting. The old law meant to protect truth, not to punish those who held it safe." The woman looked at her palm. The mark was faint in the low light. It did not look dangerous. It looked like a duty someone had placed in her hand and forgotten to fetch back. "May I?" the prince asked, with the cloth already in his hand. He spoke as one would speak before touching a book that might crack if roughly opened. She set her hand on the edge of the shawl. "Yes." He folded the cloth, dipped it into the warm water in the basin, wrung it until it steamed, and pressed it to her palm, gentle as if soothing a child. The heat soaked into her skin. For a heartbeat, she felt nothing but comfort. Then the lines under the cloth rose as if summoned. He lifted the edge to look. The crest deepened, as if ink awakened by heat, and a thin, bright bead of red welled along its smallest line at his touch. The cloth left her palm, and the faint line of red surprised everyone more than it alarmed them. It was not a wound to be feared. It was as if the mark had its own life, and had answered the touch with a whisper of blood, the way a lip answers air after a long hold. Brother Thomas pressed a clean strip of linen over it and spoke softly. "It is only heat and memory," he said. "The skin remembers more than the mind." The prince kept his hand steady. He did not flinch. He did not sniff at superstition, nor did he bow to it. He watched the mark deepen toward clarity, and then he looked at her face. She was not in pain, she was only very awake. "Enough for now," Brother Thomas said, and secured the bandage. "Keep it covered, let it be quiet." She nodded without understanding why the agreement felt like the first decision she had made, that was fully hers. There came a knock that did not wait for an answer. The door opened just wide enough to admit a chamberlain's whisper, and then closed again. "Wycliffe calls for the hearing, Your Highness. In the solar. He wishes it orderly and small." The prince stood. He glanced at Brother Thomas, and then at her. His eyes asked a question without words. "Are you strong enough?" She wanted to say no. She wanted a bed that would keep her as long as she needed. But the word no sat heavy and would not move. The word yes stood up straight. "I will go," she said. Her voice surprised her by not shaking. Brother Thomas helped her to sit fully and smoothed the shawl over her shoulders. The maid tied the bandage in a neat knot as if tying a ribbon on a parcel. The prince offered an arm. She took it. The warmth of another person's steadiness ran through her like a path laid down where there had been none. They walked slowly through corridors that smelled of beeswax and old linen. Tapestries watched, and the faces stitched into them seemed to hold a breath, the way the morning had held its. Two servants turned their heads and then remembered to look elsewhere. A page ran ahead to announce without announcing. The solar was bright. Windows welcomed a winter pale that did not warm but did illuminate. A long table stood under the windows, with paper laid at one end and nothing at the other. Wycliffe had not yet come. Lady Cecily stood near the hearth with her hands folded, as composed as if she were a portrait come to life. She saw them and came forward at once, the way a well-bred daughter of the court is taught to close distance for the sake of easing another's embarrassment. Her smile was a softer version of ceremony. She adjusted the shawl, though it did not need adjusting. "You look stronger," she said. "I'm glad of it." "Thank you," the woman said, and found she meant it. Lady Cecily did not look through her. She looked at her, which was a relief like a warm cup. Wycliffe entered with careful steps. He greeted the prince, bowed to Lady Cecily, nodded to Brother Thomas, and then placed a thin bundle of papers on the table, as one might place a loaf that had been divided with exactness. He looked at the woman last and did not bow. He smiled, and his smile was like a seal in wax. It fixed the moment without warmth. "We are few," he said, "as befits prudence. We will be swift." Brother Thomas moved to a chair by the table and uncapped his ink. He hung the feather of his pen above the page, not touching, ready to catch small truths as they fell. The prince stood behind, and a little to the side of the chair placed for her. He did not sit. He did not crowd. He held his hands loosely behind his back, a posture that said both presence and patience. The woman took her chair. The seat was low enough that her feet found the floor. The rug underfoot felt lush, and the sensation of it, even through stockings, grounded her more than any kind word. Wycliffe seated himself and announced, as if to the walls as much as to those present, that this was not a trial. It was not a spectacle. It was an inquiry for the sake of order and care. "Words can be both a fence and a blanket," he said without saying it. He began with the easiest thread. "Do you remember entering the lake?" She searched for the edge of that memory and found only the inside of cold and the outside of light. Her tongue felt thick. "I remember water," she said, and waiting. Wycliffe's pen, which was really Brother Thomas's pen, scratched lightly. The cleric did not editorialize. He caught the word waiting and set it down in full. "Do you remember how you came to Windsor?" Wycliffe asked. She closed her eyes to see better and saw instead a fog that did not move. "I do not know," she said. "Do you know your name?" There was a weight behind the question that made her chest ache. It wanted to be answered. It could not be. "Not yet," she said, and felt ashamed of the words even as Brother Thomas nodded to show there was no shame in truth. Wycliffe looked at her bandaged hand. He did not request to see the mark. He did not need to, for word of it had already reached the corridors that carry such things. He phrased the next question as if it concerned a fashion rather than a fate. "When did you first notice the sign upon your palm?" Brother Thomas spoke before she had to try to force an answer that would not come. "I examined it when she was warmed. It is old. It is not a fresh burn. It is an inherited scar by some right I have seen only in writing." Wycliffe inclined his head slightly. "Writing holds many things that life does not," he said, "and yet here we are." His eyes flicked to the prince. "May I remind us that symbols stir long memories. The Queen's peace requires not only compassion but discretion." The prince's expression did not change. He might have been studying the grain of the table. He said quietly, "Discretion is not the same as secrecy." "Of course not," Wycliffe agreed, and placed a small stack of blank parchments before him, as if to suggest that they could write what they agreed upon and nothing more. "Brother Thomas, this mark, what do you name it?" Brother Thomas set down his pen. "House Aveline," he said, "the crest of an old wardship. Once an oath was made that a ledger be kept to guard the crown from confusion. The keeper of the ledger bore the sign in the flesh. A sound ran through the room that was not a sound. Lady Cecily straightened to attention without letting her spine betray tension. Her hands remained folded. The prince did not move. Wycliffe did not feign ignorance. "The old story," he said evenly. "It would not be the first time a house pressed its device where it ought not be pressed." "It would be the first time for this one," Brother Thomas replied. "Not haughty, merely precise. The text is clear. The emblem is not costume. It is a vow." Wycliffe's eyes warmed by 1 degree. "A vow is a good thing," he said. He let the pause after good stretch until one could place in it what one wished, provided it remains within its proper bounds. Lady Cecily, as if offering a kindness to shift the air, stepped forward with a small package. She unfolded it to show a pair of gloves sewn of soft wool. "They are very ordinary," she said with a smile. "Ordinary things are sometimes the best company for a person who has been made to feel singular." The woman looked at the gloves. She received them with both hands and set them in her lap. "Thank you," she said. Lady Cecily's eyes held hers without calculation for a moment, and in that resting gaze there was true gentleness. The woman let her shoulders ease a fraction. Wycliffe went on. "For the comfort of the court and yourself, we will lodge you in a quiet place," he said. "It would be unkind to subject you to every stare. You shall have a maid, a fire, and meals without delay. Brother Thomas will attend at set hours. We will be cautious in our steps until more is known." It was care. It was also distance. The woman heard both, and because she had no power to refuse and no clear desire to accept, she did the only thing she could do that felt like hers. She lifted her chin and met Wycliffe's eyes as though she had come to the palace by invitation. "I am grateful," she said. The prince spoke for the first time since the questions began. He sounded as if he had chosen his words at dawn and kept them close until needed. "She will not be spoken of as a danger," he said. "Not by those in this room, not by any under our charge." Wycliffe bowed so precisely, one could have set a jewel on the point of his nose, and it would not have wobbled. "Your wishes are my orders, Your Highness." He meant it, and also meant that wishes alone do not govern a court. Lady Cecily, who had never enjoyed seeing two kinds of power meet head-on, redirected the moment with a small courtesy. "Would you like broth?" she asked the woman, and nodded to the maid. The maid, who had been waiting in the doorway, brought a cup, and the woman held it with careful hands and drank as if it were a negotiation between her and her body. There were a few more questions. Not many. Wycliffe was too skilled to press where there was only stone. He asked whether any names came to mind. None did. He asked whether she felt fear. She surprised herself again with the steadiness of her no. He asked whether she would accept the kindness of quiet. She said yes, and did not let her voice bow to it. When it was done, the prince did not wait to be dismissed. He offered his arm again, and she took it, and they went out into a corridor that had grown keen with attention. Brother Thomas collected his chronicle. Lady Cecily stood for a moment, with her hand on the back of the chair where the woman had sat, as if the wood could tell her something about the person who had warmed it. Then she followed, her pace thoughtful. The tower room was on the north side. It was not the coldest in winter, but it remembered winter even in summer. The fire laid in the grate burned readily. A small table stood near the window, and the window gave a view of the lake's face, which did not look like water from here. It looked like a mirror someone had forgotten to hang. The maid put down a folded gown and a comb. There was a basin for washing and a jug that did not leak. For a person who had woken unsure of her own name, it felt like a great abundance. She wished for nothing and everything. She did not ask where she would be housed tomorrow. Rooms in palaces are like thoughts in important minds. They move according to needs that will not be explained. The prince remained until he could tell it would be a comfort for him to leave. He leaned slightly toward the door. "If you wish for more light," he said, "or for less to be said at your door, send word." He lifted the small parcel he had brought earlier and set it on the stool. Bread. And there is a small sweet if hunger is not only practical. They looked at each other as if the lake was still between them, and each was deciding whether to cross. "Thank you," she said. He inclined his head and went out. Brother Thomas came and sat near the window, his book on his knee. He did not interrogate. He did not even ask lightly. He spoke of the clock in the chapel and how it sometimes ran slow in cold and swift in heat, as if even a clock has its moods. The quiet in the room thickened into a comfort rather than a pressure. Word travelled, because it must. A laundress paused at the door with a bundle, and then went on without knocking. Deciding that a line hung straight is better than a question hung crooked, a boy with a brazier passed, glanced in, saw Brother Thomas, and straightened his back to parade his own usefulness to himself. By late afternoon, rumour had finished its first route through the castle and settled into small nests along the eaves. It peered out and blinked. It softened some faces and sharpened others. No one was unkind to her face, but courtesy itself began to shape around her like a mould. No mention of the mark, except in reduced voice. No talk of water, as if that would send her back to it. offers of shawls and gloves and slippers, all of which comforted and contained. Lady Cecily came again, alone this time, and sat near but not too near. She spoke of light things that did not require an answer. The taste of the apples kept in the barns that year, the way the pages had a competition for the swiftest errand. She allowed a pause to fall, and did not rush to fill it. "May I say something plain?" she asked at last. "Yes," the woman said. "I cannot be your friend the way a chambermaid can," Lady Cecily said. "We are not allowed such simplicity. But if you find that people's kindness feels like a cage, you may say so to me. I know the shape of such cages." She smiled a little, and for a moment her poise peeled back to show a person underneath who had practice in not speaking too quickly of herself. "Thank you," the woman said, and realized she meant it more than she had expected. Evening lowered outside the window. The lake went from mirror to slate. Brother Thomas rose and went to chapel at chime, promising to return. The maid came with a board of simple things, and reminded her to eat with the brisk kindness of a person who had seen too many trays come back full, because fear has a way of making the body forget its ordinary needs. The woman ate a little. The sweetness tucked in the prince's parcel turned out to be sugared peel, and she let it sit on her tongue until it melted into a taste that made her remember nothing, and yet made her cry. She slept again, not because she wanted to, but because a sleep without dreams drew her and she could not resist. Dreams came anyway. Stone, a carved angel, the sense of the seam, her left hand fitting where it belonged, a click that was not a door opening, but a confession answered. When she woke, the room was quiet enough to hear the crack of the fire. She sat, startled at the weight of the dream. She looked at her bandaged hand and felt a pulse under the linen that was not pain. She swung her feet to the floor and felt the cool rush under her soles. She stood, then sat again, then laughed softly at herself, because all she had done was rise and fall as if the chair were a ship and she its wave. She spent a time looking at the window. The lake had taken on a depth again, even in winter dusk. Lights pricked along the far path, as if small stars had fallen and been content to stay. She stood and went to the window and pressed her unbandaged hand to the glass. Her breath made a small cloud. There was a tap-soft knock, and the door opened enough to admit Mistress Elin, the laundress with eyes that had seen every kind of stain and knew which would lift and which would not. "I brought you a different shawl," she said without ceremony. "This one holds a whisper of rosemary." She set it near the bed. She did not pretend not to be curious. She did not stare. She did what women do with one another when the room is new. She set a small bit of homeliness into it and left. The woman smiled into the empty doorway after Elin had gone, and then noticed a faint dust on her hem. She brushed it with her fingers. It left a pale streak. Mortar. She knew the feel of it now, though she could not have said why. She felt, without deciding, that the chapel called in a language that was not language. When the nighttime watcher came to set the last board in the fire, the prince came with him carrying a narrow parcel. He had the look of a man who had made it his habit to find reasons to be where he wished to be without making a parade of it. He greeted her as he had in the morning, plain and simple, and sat at the small table where Brother Thomas had sat before. "How fares the room?" he asked. "It is still mine," she said, surprising herself with the possessive. He laughed softly. He opened the parcel to show a second pair of gloves. "These will not show every speck," he said. "The pale ones betray a person who has touched the world, and that seems a poor use of gloves." She slipped one on and then took it off again, choosing to leave her bandage in the open air. He did not remark on it. He did not urge modesty where caution had already done what it should. He also brought a small lidded pot from the kitchens. "Broth," he said. "The cook sent it to me, and I bring it to you, which is as honest a chain as I can make." She took the cup. He sat not far away, not close. He looked toward the window where frost was beginning to appear at the edges, making farm fields out of the glass. "Brother Thomas says your mark is bound to a book," he said. He said it as if he were testing a plank over water. "He has told me," she said. "I remember the story from when I was a boy," he went on, and there was a smile in his voice that did not reach his mouth. It was told to frighten and to comfort, depending on the teller. It said that once, when words were used to confuse rather than clarify, a house was charged to keep a ledger that spoke plain. That if ever the crown forgot its own accounts, a hand would arrive with the memory written in it. It is a strange thing to be told at 5. And at 20, she asked softly. At 20 it is stranger, he said, because you may find your hand empty at the very moment you are asked to hold something heavy. She looked at him. He did not withdraw his gaze. He looked at her the way one looks out over a lake and decides whether to trust the ice. He rose after a little while. He had no advice to leave which suited her. He had only a sentence that made months feel less like a wall and more like a gate. I will come in the morning, he said, if you wish it. I do, she said, and believed the word without guilt. When he left, the quiet rearranged itself. The maid returned, tucked the edges of the bed as if tucking in a child, and set a small cup of water at the stool. Then she pointed at the basket of kindling and said, "If you have need in the night, tug the bell rope and do not apologize." The woman smiled at her and wanted to ask her name, and then remembered that names were a delicate currency she did not yet hold. She slept once more, and this time the dream did not ask permission. Stone, the angel's palm, the slight give beneath her own, the sense that one secret was not kept to refuse but to protect. She woke with her left hand throbbing with a small heat that felt like a yes. She sat on the bed's edge, breathing slowly as if she had come up from deep water. Her feet found the rug. The fire had gone to embers. She stood and went to the window to see if the world had changed without her. It had not, but something inside her had slid one notch into place. She turned to reach for the shawl and found something on the bedside stool that had not been there when she slept. It lay plain as if it had been set by a careful hand. It was a hawthorn twig, green against winter, and its little fork pointed, like a small compass, toward the direction of St. George's Chapel. The hawthorn twig lay as if it had grown out of the stool overnight. Its small fork pointed, not to the fire, not to the door, but toward the window and beyond, toward the chapel. She did not laugh at the suggestion. She did not question that a twig could point. She lifted it with her right hand and felt the green of it, dim and living in winter. The maid came with kindling and paused, seeing the twig. Her eyes brightened. "Hawthorn," she said, "for good luck. Mistress Elin swears by it." She set the kindling and gave the bundle a little pat. "Do you wish for anything?" The woman looked at the window, then at the maid. "I wish to go to the chapel." The maid looked at her bandaged hand. It was a practical look, not a denying one. "I will fetch Mistress Elin," she said, "and Brother Thomas if you permit it. Doors are easier with keys." She nodded. The maid slipped out, brisk as a sparrow. The woman stood and wrapped the shawl around her shoulders. She tucked the twig into the hem as if it were a pin-drawing cloth to place. The room seemed to approve. The fire crackled. Frost drew a delicate blade across the lower edge of the window and then stopped. Mistress Elin arrived with the smell of laundry and soap folding itself around her. She looked at the twig, at the direction it pointed, and she did not cross herself or scold. She nodded instead. "It is a good morning for a quiet walk," she said. "The chapel keeps its own warmth even in January." Brother Thomas followed not long after, the chain of keys at his belt no louder than his steps. He took in the bandage, the shawl, the intent in the woman's eyes, and inclined his head, as if the three together made a sentence he understood. "We will go by the service passage," he said. "It is less attended." They went out as if to fetch a pail or carry a message. The castle's corridors held their ordinary hum, but the hum kept one note waiting. The woman walked between Elin's steady presence and Brother Thomas's quiet authority. She became aware of her breath as an act. In, out. Each step had a thought to it, and the thought was not soon or fast or secret. It was merely forward. The door to the cloister opened with the small complaint of wood that has known too many winters to be persuaded any longer to silence. The cloister walk received them with calm. The air tasted of cold stone and old beeswax, and beneath that, of dried herbs used in past seasons and still clinging to the cracks. The woman's pace slowed without her meaning to command it. She wanted to be the kind of person who did not rush where vows lived. The chapel doors were not thrown wide. Brother Thomas unlocked a modest side door meant for servants and priests and those who had business without ceremony. He pushed. The door yielded with the courtesy of a well-raised host. They entered. The space gathered itself around them. Light lay long and pale upon the floor. The carved saints gave the sense of listening without judgment. A draft moved through and made the smallest sound of pages turning, though there were no pages in that aisle to turn. The woman felt something inside her settle, the way a stone finds the riverbed and stops bumping. Mistress Elin stayed one pace behind, neither wary nor bold. Brother Thomas led them along the south wall toward the transept, where carved angels kept company with smaller creatures, in niches and along cornices. The woman did not count, but her steps did. She slowed near a particular angel before she had seen it fully. Her heart beat 2 notes quickly, and then found its ordinary courage. "There," she said, and did not know she had spoken until she heard her own voice. The angel's face was not grand. Its mouth was gentle, and its eyes were carved to look not at the center of the chapel but to the side, toward a seam in the wall where 2 stones had been fitted with care. Its palm opened toward the seam, not toward the worshipper. Brother Thomas inclined, lifting a taper to see where light did not reach. He touched the rend between the stones. It was tight. He stepped back. He looked at the woman's bandage and then at her. "Shall we try?" he asked, with a question that was more permission than instruction. She untied the knot herself. The bandage fell into Mistress Elin's cupped hand, ready to be set back the moment it was needed. The woman lifted her left hand. The mark on her palm lay quiet and warm. It did not throb now, it seemed to breathe under the skin. She placed her palm against the stone's cool. At first the contact felt unremarkable, like resting one thing on another. Then a small truth arrived. The stone had a seat for her hand. A shallow oval worn just enough to say that other hands had pressed here before hers, not yesterday, not last year, but once. The meat of her palm found the oval. Her fingers fell into place. The crest met the chill and did not reject it. She pressed, not hard. Something answered with a little sigh, as if relieved to be remembered. There was the tiniest click, not a latch thrown. A promise kept. The seam softened. A narrow panel released with the reluctance of a person who has been asked to rise too early on a cold morning. The panel slid. Behind it, a small cavity stared out like a patient eye. Within, a thing lay wrapped in waxed linen, edges darkened with age, to a deep honey color. Brother Thomas exhaled as a man breathes before he pronounces a blessing. "Gently," he said. Mistress Elin did not reach. She held the bandage and only that, and with her other hand she steadied the edge of the panel, as if letting a door lean against a hip so it would not swing closed on its own. The woman withdrew her hand, the crest cool now, and the absence of her touch did not shut the panel. Brother Thomas drew the parcel out with his long fingers, careful as if delivering a sleeping child. They set it on the bench along the wall. Brother Thomas unfolded the waxed linen. Inside lay a volume bound in leather that had been handled with respect. A small emblem had been pressed into the cover at some long ago time, a crown with a split branch and a star. The emblem echoed the image in the woman's skin. Around the binding knots the wax seals still held, their impressions intact, the string firm. Brother Thomas looked, then looked again. His face altered from study to certainty. "This is the ledger," he whispered. "The old countersign is here. The king's sages used this seal in the reign of the grandfather." He crossed himself not out of superstition, but in recognition of continuity. The woman watched his hands. The ledger did not frighten her. She felt toward it the way one feels toward a letter addressed in a hand one half remembers. It was not hers, and yet it called her use. "Shall we open it?" Mistress Elin asked, her voice low, as if speaking in a new baby's room. Brother Thomas hesitated only long enough to be sure they stood in a stillness that could receive what would be seen. "We must," he said, "if only to confirm it for the sake of the crown." He warmed one seal with his breath and the small heat of the taper. He did not break it as a conqueror breaks. He eased it. The wax gave way like winter earth under a steady thaw. He unwound the cord and lifted the cover. The paper within was thick and cream, with edges that had softened without fraying. The first page bore the countersign again, and beneath it a hand wrote in careful characters the purpose of the book, that the crown's gifts and protections be recorded plainly, that the safety of the realm be defended not only by arms, but by the truth of numbers and names, that no one be made poor by another's hidden grasp. Brother Thomas read each line as if it were prayer. He turned a page. The entries began. Dates written in the old reckoning, Names listed, sums set down, reasons given in a brief, neat style that did not waste words and did not leave room for confusion. The woman leaned closer. She did not understand every letter. She felt the weight of each stroke, the history pressed together across years like hands meeting and parting. It was not an account book that measured wheat and wool, though some of that appeared. It was a narrative in figures and names. It had a tone, and the tone was fidelity. Brother Thomas stopped at an entry that looked more recent than the page before, the ink less browned, the hand less old-fashioned. He frowned very slightly. The last entries. These must have been added within living memory. See here. He pointed to a set of names tied to grants that should have gone to repairs of the chapel roof and to the small houses of widows near the east gate. The sums had been altered and re-entered in a second hand with a note that turned a gift into a loan. The change was not a mistake. It was a design. He turned another page and found small patterns, no one of them loud, all of them forming a quiet song in a minor key. Funds that should have stayed with the stables had been reassigned to a private trust on the part of a cousin of a councillor. A stipend meant for a school had been converted to a fee for advice rendered by a gentleman with no expertise in the matter in question. Brother Thomas's mouth pressed into a line. "These are not crimes to be shouted," he murmured. "They are misuses to be corrected." He turned another page and stopped at an entry that named a letter of intent. He read aloud. "A match proposed between the prince and a house abroad, favourable to trade with a faction that would own the crown's ear in matters of credit." The ledger did not disapprove. It did not approve, it recorded. It noted that such a match would allow certain reassignments to appear harmless. Brother Thomas did not look at the woman. He looked at the heir. He closed the ledger halfway, as if to keep the words from running on their own into ears not present. "The prince must see this," Mistress Elin said, her voice the steady iron of a pot set on a trivet. "Not to stir anger, to settle what is unsettled." Brother Thomas nodded. "Yes. Not under rumour, under seal. It must be shown with discretion and in order." A soft step sounded. Sir Rowan stood at the far end of the aisle, the way a person stands when he has been drawn by a scent he cannot yet name, but knows is familiar. He did not wear a scowl or the stiffness of a man come to check what he is not meant to check. He inclined his head. "Forgive me," he said. "I came because the maid said the lady had gone to chapel, and Wycliffe likes to know where people go when they are not sitting where he expects them." He smiled, the smallest, a transparency of loyalty rather than a fence of suspicion. Brother Thomas did not shut the ledger with a snap. He did not hide it. He set his hand on it and let Rowan see the cover's emblem. "Do you know this?" he asked. Rowan came nearer. He looked and did not touch. His face carried no talent for masks. "I know the story from songs and old dinners," he said. "I did not know it had a body." "It has a body," Brother Thomas said quietly, "and a law behind it." He inclined his head toward the woman's left hand. Rowan looked, and in that look there was no fear, only the adjustment of a soldier's mind to a new piece on the board. "We will need the prince," Rowan said. "He is the person," Brother Thomas agreed. Mistress Elin, who had been still as a thread under a needle, moved at last. "I will fetch him," she said. She did not wait for permission. She knew the way to find people without knocking on doors that would require her to explain herself. While she went, the woman stood near the angel. She did not feel like a figure in a tale. She felt tired and focused. She pressed her fingers together and then relaxed them. The crest lay warm and quiet. She reached out and let her fingertips touch the carved fold of the angel's robe, as if to say thank you to the stone for remembering. Prince Edward arrived without running, and without making the sound of a man who has hurried. He looked at the woman first, then at Brother Thomas, then at the ledger, then at Rowan. He placed himself by the bench and did not sit. He put his palm on the edge of the wood as if placing a claim not on the book, but on the moment. "Tell me," he said. Brother Thomas did not dramatize. He laid out what they had seen. He spoke the words ledger, wardship, countersign, entries, alterations. He read the line about the proposed match without glancing at the prince. He read the note that tied the match to a broader plan about credits and counsel. He did not say betrayal. He said design. The prince listened. His face did not do the things faces do when men are trying to control them. He did not blush. He did not grow pale. He fixed attention and let the information sit where it landed. At the end, he asked only one question. Is this entire book what it says it is? Brother Thomas held the ledger with both hands like a liturgy. It is, he said, and it is not a weapon, it is a mirror. The prince's mouth moved with the beginning of something like a half-smile that did not reach joy. Mirrors are troublesome, he said, when people prefer paintings. He looked at Rowan. Can you ensure we are not interrupted for one more minute? Rowan's glance slid to the side aisle and then up to the gallery. He had learned to read movement where movement hoped not to be seen. He said softly, We have already been noticed enough to need speed, not secrecy. The woman found herself speaking without knowing she would. It should go back, she said. It should be where it belongs until it is called for. Brother Thomas nodded with relief toward prudence that matched his own. Yes, hidden is not lost, he said. The prince looked at the woman. His eyes held the ledger and her hand at once without making one the shadow of the other. He agreed. We will not carry this down corridors as if it were bait, he said. Mistress Elin had already folded the waxed linen in readiness. Brother Thomas closed the ledger with gentle precision, wound the cord, warmed the wax, and pressed the seal against it with his ring to encourage the old impression to hold as if it had never been disturbed. He lifted the parcel and handed it to the woman. Will you? He asked. She took the weight. It was not much. It was significant. She turned to the angel and set the parcel in the cavity's small hollow. It was a close fit that made sense of itself. Her left palm found the oval again. She pressed. The panel eased forward and met her hand with the satisfaction of a drawer closed. It clicked. Nothing beyond that sound changed. The chapel did not receive new light. The air did not move. And yet something in her body relaxed, as if a muscle had unclenched. They stood a moment in the ordinary sanctity of the aisle. The prince looked up at the angel's face as one might look up at a person who had kept faith when no one had been watching. Thank you, he said. And whether he spoke to the woman or the stone or the vow itself did not matter. We will do this right, he said next, to the room and to the woman and to the line that connected them. Brother Thomas, with me. Rowan, with me. Elin, you have done enough for 10 mornings. Will you see the lady safely to her room? Mistress Elin inclined. Gladly, she said. Her eyes warmed the woman for a breath. They turned to leave the aisle. The first step into the nave opened the chapel's human air again. Voices threaded a little through the space from the outer door, where 2 choir boys had come to set morning hymn sheets, and were whispering as if whispering did not count as sound. Brother Thomas moved with purpose toward the side door. They had nearly reached it when a figure slipped inside from the cloister and froze at the sight of them. It was the steward who kept the keys to the vestry, and also to the little cabinet where spiced wine was kept for high feast days. He made a face that looked like a smile, but hid more calculation than warmth. Pardon, he said. I was told there had been activity here, and that I should make a note for Lord Wycliffe. Rowan stepped forward, not barring, simply filling an opening that did not need to be wide. He nodded with courtesy. A note may be made, he said, when there is more to write than the words someone told me there was activity. The steward's eyes flicked to the woman, and then to the panel near the angel, and then back to Rowan's chest, with something like a shrug in them. Of course.